The date was December 24th, 1999. It was Christmas Eve, a time for celebration. Indian Airlines flight IC-814 was on its route. The plane had departed from Kathmandu, Nepal. It was headed towards Delhi, India. The aircraft was an Airbus A300. On board were 176 passengers and 15 crew members. Many were families looking forward to holidays. Their journey, however, was about to turn into a terrifying ordeal. A nightmare was just beginning. High above the clouds, 5 armed men took control of the aircraft. They were the hijackers. These individuals were members of Harkat-ul-Mujahideen. This is a militant group based in Pakistan. Their names were Ibrahim Athar, Shahid Akhtar Syed, Sunni Ahmed Qazi, Mistry Zahur Ibrahim and Shakir. They were heavily armed with guns, grenades and knives. Their expressions were grim, their intentions clearly hostile. They were prepared for a long confrontation. The passengers and crew were now at their mercy. Fear quickly filled the cabin of IC-814. The hijacking started shortly after the plane took off from Tribhuvan International Airport. It happened while the aircraft was in Indian airspace. The hijackers suddenly stormed the cockpit. They overpowered the pilots very quickly. They forced Captain Devi Sharan to change the flight's direction. Passengers heard commotion from the front of the plane. Then the hijackers emerged, shouting commands. Initial confusion turned into stark terror. The festive mood evaporated instantly, replaced by dread. No one knew what would happen next. A chilling silence fell over the passengers. People exchanged fearful glances, unsure what to do. The hijackers patrolled the aisles, brandishing their weapons. They warned everyone to remain seated and silent. The crew, though terrified themselves, tried to maintain some calm. They attempted to pacify the hijackers and reassure passengers, but it was clear this was a serious, life-threatening situation. The hijackers made their control absolute. This was the grim start of an 8-day nightmare. The flight to Delhi had become a flight into the unknown. The hijacked plane was first forced to land in Amritsar, India. It touched down at Rajashansi International Airport. Indian authorities on the ground were alerted. They tried to delay the aircraft, hoping to immobilize it. Crisis management teams were scrambled. However, coordination was slow and fraught with difficulties. The hijackers became impatient and threatened to kill hostages. They demanded immediate refueling. A critical window of opportunity to end the crisis in Amritsar was arguably lost. The plane took off again after about 45 minutes, refueled. The next destination was Lahore, Pakistan. The plane landed at Lahore's airport late at night. Pakistani authorities were initially unwilling to allow the plane to land. They turned off runway lights and blocked the runway. However, facing a fuel emergency, they eventually relented. They refused to allow passengers to deplane. They provided a limited amount of fuel. Pakistani officials made it clear they wanted the plane out of their country quickly. The hijackers' frustration grew, and so did the fear among the hostages. The plane departed Lahore, still under the hijackers' command. IC-814 then flew towards the United Arab Emirates. It landed at Al Minhad Air Base in Dubai. This stop brought a small measure of relief for some. The hijackers agreed to release 27 hostages. These included women, children, and some elderly passengers. Crucially, they also released the body of Rupin Katyal. Katyal, a young man on his honeymoon, had been brutally stabbed by the hijackers earlier. His death underscored the grave danger everyone faced. Some food, water, and medical supplies were provided in Dubai, but the core group of hostages remained captive. From Dubai, the aircraft made its final journey. It flew to Kandahar in Afghanistan. At that time, Kandahar was under the control of the Taliban regime. The hijackers evidently felt this was a safe haven. The plane landed at Kandahar International Airport on December 25th. This began the longest and most difficult phase of the crisis. The remaining hostages and crew faced an extremely uncertain future. They were now pawns in a high-stakes geopolitical drama. The conditions on the plane were deteriorating rapidly. The final stage of the ordeal had begun. Once in Kandahar, the hijackers clearly stated their demands. They demanded the release of 3 specific militants. These men were imprisoned in Indian jails for terrorist activities. The first was Maulana Masood Azhar, a prominent ideologue. The second was Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, a British-born militant. The third was Mushtaq Ahmed Zaga, a Kashmiri separatist. These were not minor figures. Their release would be a significant concession. The hijackers threatened to kill more hostages if their demands were not met. The Indian government faced an agonizing choice. The safety of over 150 lives hung in the balance. India dispatched a team of negotiators to Kandahar. The negotiating environment was extremely challenging. Kandahar was Taliban territory, and India had no diplomatic ties with them. The Taliban acted as intermediaries. However, their sympathies were widely perceived to be with the hijackers. The negotiations were slow, tense, and drawn out. Language barriers and cultural differences added to the complications. The Indian team had to operate under immense constraints. They were constantly aware of the danger to the hostages. Every passing day increased the risk and the pressure. Back in India, public pressure on the government was immense. Relatives of the hostages gathered in Delhi. They held daily vigils and emotionally charged protests. They pleaded with the government to secure the release of their loved ones. The media provided round-the-clock coverage of the crisis. Every detail, every rumor was broadcast to an anxious nation. This put the Indian leadership under an intense spotlight. The government had to weigh the safety of the hostages against national security interests. There were no easy answers, only difficult decisions. The nation watched and waited, hoping for a peaceful resolution. The standoff in Kandahar lasted for 7 harrowing days. The murder of Rupin Katyal earlier had already shown the hijackers' brutality. They made repeated threats to execute more passengers. One passenger, Anil Khurana, was reportedly threatened with death. Conditions on the aircraft were deplorable. Food and water were scarce, and sanitation was a major problem. Passengers suffered from fear, exhaustion, and illness. The psychological toll on both hostages and crew was enormous. The hijackers maintained a climate of fear throughout the ordeal. Hope dwindled with each passing day of captivity. Finally, on December 31st, 1999, the week-long crisis came to an end. The Indian government made a painful decision. It agreed to release the 3 demanded militants. India's then Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh personally escorted them to Kandahar. The exchange took place on Afghan soil. Once the militants were handed over, the hijackers freed the hostages. The exhausted passengers and crew disembarked from the plane. They were flown back to India to an emotional homecoming. The immediate nightmare was over, but the repercussions had just begun. The nation breathed a collective sigh of relief mixed with unease. The 5 hijackers, along with the 3 released militants, were given safe passage. They reportedly traveled from Kandahar to Pakistan. Most of the hijackers managed to evade capture for years. Their identities were known, but bringing them to justice proved difficult. One hijacker, Mistry Zahor Ibrahim, also known as Chief, was reportedly killed in Karachi, Pakistan, in March 2022. Another, Yusuf Azhar, brother of Masood Azhar, was also reported killed in an airstrike in Pakistan. However, full justice for the crime remained elusive for many. The lack of accountability for all perpetrators remains a sore point. The escape of the hijackers highlighted cross-border terrorism challenges. The release of the 3 militants had severe long-term consequences. Maulana Masood Azhar went on to found Jaish-e-Mohammed, or JEM. JEM was responsible for numerous deadly attacks in India. This included the 2001 attack on the Indian Parliament. Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh was later arrested for the kidnapping and murder of American journalist Daniel Pearl in 2002. Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar also continued his militant activities. The decision to trade militants for hostages while saving lives empowered extremist groups. It demonstrated the high price of negotiating with terrorists. These events fueled further conflict and instability in the region. The IC-814 hijacking is a watershed moment in modern Indian history. It starkly exposed vulnerabilities in aviation security at the time. India subsequently implemented significantly stricter security measures at airports. It led to a major overhaul of the country's anti-hijacking policy. The incident also deeply impacted India-Pakistan relations. It reinforced India's concerns about cross-border terrorism. For the world, it was a grim reminder of the evolving tactics of terror groups. The hijacking of IC-814 remains a painful chapter, a lesson learned at a terrible cost. Its shadow continues to influence security and diplomatic discourse in South Asia.